Hey everybody, my name is Brian from Big River Film Co., and welcome to episode 1 of our brand new podcast. Over the last decade, Nathan and I have worked to build Big River Film Co. and to tell the stories of brands around the world, but we realized we had never really done the same for ourselves. We view this podcast as an opportunity for us to tell our own stories, but also to eventually bring on individuals that can share their own stories for how they got to where they are, and to potentially provide inspiration to other young filmmakers, creative professionals, or even entrepreneurs that are looking forward to working for themselves in the future. Without further delay, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this particular podcast, why we're doing it. So for the viewers, this is our first podcast, right? And I think that this first episode, we're going to kind of unapologetically talk a little bit about who we are, what brought us into the field, and give people a bit of a chance to learn more about us. But in broad sweeping terms, as we get into more episodes on this podcast, what do you think we're really going to be bringing to the table for the viewers who are interested in sticking around?
I think the reason we're here, is we've been doing this for so long, almost a decade now. And I think we've had our heads down and are always concentrating on bringing in the next project, working on existing projects that we're doing, and have relied so heavily on marketing ourselves through our own portfolio that we've never really put ourselves in front of the camera and really ever let people get to know our audience, get to know us, right? So I guess I would think our audience would be, people that would work with us, either like a brand manager or marketing manager or just a brand, but also other filmmakers who might collaborate with us. And so it's funny because we're always talking about storytelling and connecting with audiences. When we're working with other brands, we're trying to connect them with their audiences, but we've never really done the work ourselves to put ourselves in front of the camera and connect with our audience. So obviously I think there's incentive for us for marketing ourselves, but I think for the viewers, I think future vision for the podcast, I imagine the audience being being able to bring in guests and talk to other people that work in the creative industry or even just the entrepreneurial space. So I really view the audience as anybody who is looking to get into filmmaking, looking to be in business for themselves, works in the creative industry, whether it's a creative director or a marketing director, or just anybody that wants to sit around and listen to two people talk.
Yep. All right. So I think the first thing that we wanted to chat about here was just give us a little bit of a brief overview of, from your point of view, what this company is, what we bring to the table as a company, what makes us unique.
Yeah, so Big River Film Co., I guess if I were to describe us to anybody who would just come up to me on the street and ask, would say, we're a small production company. We specialize in doing a lot of commercial work. We specialize in doing also documentary work. In general, I feel like a lot of companies, we're kind of generalists, so we kind of pick up projects and do a lot of different things that come our way. But I would say that our sweet spot is definitely commercial work and also documentary work.
Yeah, and I think too we bring an interesting dynamic to a lot of the projects that you and I work on together, because it's just the two of us that kind of work day to day in this company. But we also have the ability to really flex our crew sizes and the size of the projects that we work on. And you and I, like you said, have been working together for close to a decade now. And we have a really great, I think, synergy when we work together. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we're working together. We have all these great systems down. I think that's fairly unique that you find a director of photography and a director that work together on the majority of their projects. And you take on some small gigs where, you're DPing or shooting something for somebody else, and I also will go out for my own gigs. But really, for the most part, if it's a project that's being done by Big River Film Co., you and I are going to be part of that project. And I think that's something that makes us unique.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we definitely both do our own freelance work here and there, but I think anytime we take on a big project, we definitely are always like, you and I are the core team. They're going to work together. And according to how big the project is, we'll bring in other contractors that we know and trust and have worked with in the past or are recommended to us by people we know and trust. So that gives us a good opportunity to, I don't know, we work together so often that it makes things really streamlined and easy because we just kind of understand who's going to do what in the pre-production process or leading up to our shooting days. We kind of each have our tasks that we've done so many times and have worked together. We just know the other one's going to take care of it. I mean, obviously we communicate about who's going to take care of what, but it's kind of like understood going into it. Okay, we've done it this way in the past. It's worked out really great. We're going to do it again. And I think it's allowed us to be really efficient and to kind of hit above our weight, so to speak, I think, in the projects that we're able to take on for such a small team.
Mhm.
And I think that's definitely something that makes us unique.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think what we're doing here will be interesting because it's kind of, I mean, everything we talk about is very exciting to me. It's stuff I enjoy just chit chatting about. And you and I have, we've been working together for 10 years. We, on a weekly basis, are having these meetings where we chat about everything from lighting to the business of filmmaking because we're both in this together, doing it together. We have that other person to have these conversations with. And we've found, I think, for the two of us, for that to be so helpful and kind of enjoyable for us. So to be able to share a lot of that knowledge that we have on the industry, I think will be valuable for people. And I also think that when we are hired for projects, the agencies, the businesses that are hiring Big River Film Co. are hiring us. They're hiring the two of us to work with us. And I think that that ability to jive personally and with work ethic, with creative vision, with the ability to collaborate with other people, it is why we get hired. And so, like you mentioned, we've traditionally relied so much on our portfolio, but I think there's a whole nother layer of what we can bring to the table that we can kind of explore here a little bit and let people know a little bit more about.
Yeah, I think it's to kind of talking a little bit to what you were mentioning in a lot of our catch up calls and how much time we spend on calls with each other. I think it has been really valuable. And especially, I think going into something like this podcast in the current time and kind of the state that the industry is in, I know that I feel our calls are somewhat cathartic and a little bit of like, we can chat about when we're trying to bring in a project and maybe haven't heard back from the customer or whatever, or maybe we're a little stressed about whatever it might be. I think those calls are always valuable for us to kind of get us back on track and be concentrating on the business. So I think there's a value for the audience, maybe, if not for some other, if they're involved in the creative industry, for some kind of a cathartic listen, I guess, so to speak. And then also, yeah, for people to get to know us a little bit more. And I think also for just anybody who's maybe thinking about getting into the industry or, young people that eventually have goals of trying to work as a filmmaker or content creator, whatever it might be, to understand our journey, how we've gotten here. I mean, we've spent nearly a decade doing this full time for a living. So I think that's probably a goal that a lot of people have. And it's one of those career fields where there's no one set
Yeah.
path. So I think when you hear other people's stories of how they got where they are, it's always interesting and puts a different perspective on how someone who is an aspiring filmmaker might go about their own career path.
Yeah, I think in this industry, it's always really interesting to hear people's stories of how they got to where they are because we're not an industry that you necessarily, you go to college, you get this major, you go to grad school, you get your other certifications, and there's a fairly streamlined approach to getting into a career field. This career field is one that you have people from all walks of life, from all different kinds of backgrounds. Everybody has such a unique story. And it's such a competitive field that making it in this field is very difficult. And so, for a lot of especially young aspiring filmmakers or video producers or directors, figuring out how they're going to get from point A in their career to point B is big, and hearing the stories of other people, I think, is always interesting. So, um, I think we should talk about our story, how we got to where we are, each of us, what our background
Ooh,
was,
great
and yeah,
segue.
and where we got to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really professional podcast segue there. Do you want to start off? What is your background? What started you kind of interested in the career field of filmmaking, directing, and just overall, just like a creative, working in the creative world?
Yeah, for me, being, working in the creative world and I would say like manifesting creative things in my life was something I've done since I was a kid. I used to be really, I like to tell a story. I used to be really into making things when I was a kid and restoring old things. And there was a bit of a creativity in that. So when I was a kid, I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money, but I really wanted a nice mountain bike. It was very important to me to have a nice mountain bike. And what I did was I cobbled together all of these old bikes that we had sitting around into something that was actually a pretty, I think, pretty nice mountain bike. And I even went through and I spray painted. Specialized was the brand of mountain bike that I love the most. And I printed out a Specialized logo on our computer and made a stencil out of it and spray painted the Specialized logo. And my friends thought that I was riding around on a Specialized bike. And for me, that process of kind of creating something where there was nothing was really is something that I just naturally did as a kid. And I think that was kind of what, like, where my whole career and why I like making videos is along the same lines as that, is the creation, the manifestation of something that wasn't there to there. So for me, it goes all the way back, I think, to doing that kind of stuff when I was a
The
kid.
counterfeiting bike.
Yeah, yeah, and I use that as an example, but I mean, I did the same thing with a drum set. I wanted a Pearl export drum set, and I got an old drum set and I cobbled pieces together. I put a new finish on it and like put the Pearl export little logo on it and everything. And it was something that I always loved doing. So, um it definitely goes back to that for me. So, anyway, when I was a kid, I was always doing that. And then in college, I did communication. So I went to a liberal arts college and I learned a little bit about everything for communications, but I never took more than a 4 credit course on video production. But it was after college that I really started to get more and more into the video side of things. Because for me, it was the ultimate creativity tool. You got to bring all of the tenets of photography, sound design, and so much more, all these things that I'd learned about in college, but you got to bring them all together in one place. So I worked for a company in DC that we made e-courses for the United States Institute of Peace, these video e-courses. And it was very meaningful work, I would say, but it wasn't the most fulfilling work for me. We were kind of a content farm in a lot of ways, and we were making this content that was going out to people in war-torn nations and conflict zones. And so this stuff that we were working on was making a significant impact on people, and I knew that. So it was very rewarding. But for me, there just was something that was unfulfilling about making e-courses, and I really wanted to do something that was a bit more creative and a bit more dynamic. So I left DC and struck out on my own and started Big River Film Co. I kind of bootstrapped, everything as much as I could. Yeah, so when you and I met originally, I think I was still sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a house in Delaware with some guys that I'd moved in with because I had a slight acquaintance with them. And I kind of came to the realization that if I was going to make the pivot to my own company, I was going to have to continue doing some of the work I was doing, which they graciously let me do from my previous company. And I was going to have to start to mix in kind of my own work. And I was taking all the money that I could and really putting it towards the company, getting a little bit of gear, getting an office space, and kind of getting set up. And so the that period in my life was a little bit tumultuous because there was a lot of kind of people looking at me and going like, what are you doing? Are you really gonna leave DC, sleep on a mattress in Delaware of all
Yeah, leave
places,
DC where
and get the
there's,
thing started? But
yeah, definitely more work to be done and go to Delaware to
yeah,
start a company.
yeah,
However, it is cheaper to
yeah,
live, so I'll give
but
you that.
yeah, and there was also something else going on in there for me too, which was I had slowly started to realize when I was in DC, and I think for anybody, I mean, honestly, anybody in any career field, but especially people kind of in the creative spaces, you need to find a space in a community where you feel comfortable, where you feel at home, where you feel like you can kind of be yourself. And for me, DC just wasn't that. I've always had a connection to nature and loved living a little bit closer to nature. And I couldn't, oh, when I lived in DC, it took 2 hours to drive somewhere to take what I considered an actual hike that was like in the woods where I wasn't going to see other people around. And for me, that was important. So moving to Delaware kind of helped me keep my feet planted and being a little bit closer to some more, going to the beach in Delaware, being in nature a bit more, but then also close enough to DC where I could go back and be part of the work that I was previously doing there. So I don't know, from there the rest is a little bit of history between you and I in terms of how we got to meet each other and go from it. But why don't you want to tell a little bit from your perspective what it was like to get into the industry and how we got to working together?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about my story of being a DP, I feel like it's unique in some ways, and then it's not unique in others. It's unique, but it's not. So I guess what I mean by that is like getting into the idea of being a DP. I feel like my story is not all that different from a lot of other people. Like my interest in the career field kind of started with photography. In college, I
Mm-hmm.
really started, that's when I kind of ended up with my first camera and started taking photos. And I got a camera because I was going on a study abroad trip and I wanted to take good pictures. And so I also was really into nature and was studying wildlife conservation in college. And
Mm-hmm.
at the time, the Planet Earth DVD series was real big. So I was starting to get really into like all this, creating good imagery of nature. So I was really into that and really had a lot of fun learning about photography and creating images. And there was kind of a lot of different things kind of going on at the time. So I was starting to get into photography. I also played in a band at the time. And with this new camera, we needed somebody to take photos and record our shows and cut it together and, get the word out and put stuff online. So that's what kind of introduced me to video editing also and shooting video. And then I started to realize like, man, I really like, I like, photography. I like music. And I found filmmaking was
Mm-hmm.
like a really cool combination of the two. And I really liked how you could mix them to create different emotions. And, you change the music to an image and it totally can shift how you
Yeah.
feel about something entirely. So that really kind of piqued my
Yeah.
interest. And then at the same time, I also met a really good friend of mine who now, lives in LA and works in the industry. And my friend Matt, was really into writing, very into movies, and he was really into writing comedy sketches and shooting comedy sketches. So he and I started hanging out and partnering and shooting little sketches and just doing, goofy stuff. And it was kind of like, man, this is kind of fun. You just get to hang out with your friends and goof off. And that's when I started thinking about it as more of like a potential career field maybe, and
Mm-hmm.
working in the creative industry, because I don't know that being creative was anything that was really a big staple or a part of my young life. I was
Mm.
more heavy into sports and playing soccer and lacrosse and playing on traveling teams, and my time was so monopolized with that I never really gave much time to the arts or creativity. And it wasn't until I was in college and older that I kind of started getting into that. And yeah, so then once I graduated college, I think I was kind of like, well, what do I do? So I got a regular job, a 9 to 5 job, and my whole thing was I'm just going to work a regular 9 to 5 job to save money to go to film school. I got in my mind that I really wanted to do this, and I was going to go to film school. And so, kind of like you bootstrapping, I was just working every day, saving every penny that I could, with the goal of I'm going to pay for film school. So I did that for a number of years, probably I think it was 5 years, and eventually I applied to film
Mm.
school, and I ended up applying to and getting into Florida State University, which was a really competitive program, and went down there and went through all the interview process and did all that stuff. And it was really exciting to get admitted to such a competitive program. And then the reality started to dawn on me as the acceptance date was creeping up on me. And I started tallying up how much of my precious money I was going to have to spend, that I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
I was willing to plunge myself into debt for what felt like a fun thing I like to do, but such an uncertain career field.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
Because
was kind
as
of the
uncertain as things are right now, what was the uncertainty level for at that point in time for you?
so in the early 2000s, when I was kind of getting into this, it was a lot more novel to find people that were, filmmakers or content creators for a living. The world of camera equipment and cameras that can produce really good visuals has come such a long way in that time. And I was starting to get into it around the time when, like the Canon 5D had just come out. And it was like, holy cow, you mean you can take a digital SLR and shoot some really good looking video? So things, I felt like it was a little bit of a boom period where people were suddenly realizing, like, hey, this is like becoming really democratized and really accessible, whereas before it was, a lot more difficult and expensive. So there was, I feel like, a lot of optimism about around it at that time, which I
Mm.
think was a little bit motivating. And also, I mean, you had so many other things that were kind of new at the time. YouTube was somewhat new. I mean, the internet itself was still like way behind where it is today. So it felt like there was
Mm-hmm.
so much opportunity, and everything was just less saturated, I think, back then. And getting into it now, I could definitely see it's easier to get into, but it's probably a lot more difficult to cut through the noise and become visible. But at the same
Yeah.
time, you have
Yeah.
so many tools available to you and platforms available to you. And if you do the right things, I mean, you really
Mm-hmm.
can get great exposure. So that's kind of the how I came into being interested in being a DP, which is kind of a little different than maybe the actual practice of becoming one. But that's maybe
Sure.
the less unique portion of the unique story, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. When I met you, we were cross paths. You were walking through the office that I was currently working at that time, and a mutual friend introduced us. We went out and got drinks. We just kind of realized that we had a lot of like similar sensibilities, and we were both into, video production, and both just very interested in it as a career. And I think something more than just a hobby. And where I think both of us were at is that we didn't have a lot of um, close friends that lived around us or that were nearby that were into video in the way that we were. And so when we crossed paths, it was great because I think we just instantly clicked in terms of becoming friends. I mean, I feel like we became pretty fast friends,
Yeah,
and then we also
absolutely.
had this love for video production that we also got into, and we just started working together more and more often, and I was able to bring you in on a project here or there, and then I think we really just started to see the power of the collaboration that we could make things that were just so much greater than anything we could do on our own. Or at least I remember feeling that myself because you're a very you're a person who really values getting things to a really high level. You know, doing things really, really well is extremely important to you. And you took what I was doing and I feel like gave it a certain level of polish and professionalism, and you brought a standard of shooting to the table that was frankly a little bit beyond what I thought I might ever be able to accomplish, just because I hadn't been around a lot of other people who knew how to get the stuff there. I was much more on the side of interested in the business, interested in generating some profit and making it something that I can make a living from. And, having it be something that I like to do, but I don't know, you just opened me up to, I think, a whole nother level of being able to work on stuff. And when we first met, you were actually working on the show House of Cards too, that you were bringing home a lot of experience from that and kind of seeing some of the best in the industry at the time. You got to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, that was a great experience. And I feel the same about you when we met. I think, obviously I think you have a lot of strong talents as a director, but I also think you brought a lot to the table that I think I'm pretty bad at, the networking and business side
Mm-hmm.
and the having the foresight to be like, okay, these are the kind of maneuvers that we should be making to get into a particular market or connect with a particular type of client. You were really, really talented at that. And I still remember when we were trying to make our first short film, the 3 for 300 film. I can't remember how long we've been working together at that point. Maybe 2 years or so, maybe three max. And we were
Yeah.
going to was it the Chamber of Commerce? What was it when we went to the meeting? What was was it some sort of committee
Yeah,
meeting?
we had we basically, when we were trying to find the funding, we had to pitch it to the board, the town of Dover
It was a
board,
city
I
council
believe is what it
meeting. That's what
was.
it was. It was
Yeah.
a city council meeting. So I
Yeah.
remember going into this thing and I felt like I was sweating bullets. I'm like, I'm going to be a bumbling idiot. There's no way they're going to give us any sort of grant money to make this film. I'm going to sound like a complete idiot. And I remember we walked up there and you walked up to that podium and you just absolutely killed it. Like you took every question, you spoke so well, and it was
Mm.
just so far above anything that I would have ever done. I don't know what it is. I clam up and I get you in my head. And so all that to say, like I think you brought a lot to the table as well. And I think that's why we really complement each other well.
Mm.
And I think also when we're working
Yeah.
on set, when you're not just the only person, you when I met you, you were the only person that was part of the business. You're doing everything at that point. You're shooting, you're scheduling, you're doing so much, and you feel like just your brain power on any given day. You can only dedicate so much. It's always divided, so you can't really concentrate well on any one task. So when we started working together, I think it was really nice to be able to, okay, I can just concentrate on making this look as best as I can, and Nathan can concentrate on talking to the people that are on camera, or like maybe some other aspect of directing that's coming up. So I felt that was really valuable. And then yeah, I was just at a certain point, as far as like, a lot of the stuff I was learning, I was really fortunate to be able to work on House of Cards for a number of years and really get to view uh, experts and people that were just like at the absolute pinnacle in
Mm-hmm.
their careers doing
Yeah.
stuff. And it was really the
Yeah.
first introduction for me to seeing how like really big sets run. And I'd worked on small sets, in New York doing, PAing jobs and working as second AC and stuff like that. But this was like the first really big operation where you had just
Mm-hmm.
incredible amounts of budget and lighting and a stage and actors where
Yeah.
we got to, watch rehearsals and I could see how the DP works and how the gaffer would,
Yeah.
bring in the lights and I would just eavesdrop on everything. And I was just like a sponge trying to take in
Mm-hmm.
everything I could. And
Yeah.
then if you and I were
And
shooting, I would
especially
try to
when we,
replicate it.
yeah, I was gonna say, especially when we started working together, I remember you, because when we started working together, you were still on House of Cards for a lot of days, and then I was bringing you into projects wherever I could. And so I think at that point too, I remember you were like, you'd come back and be like, okay, so they shot this scene and this is exactly how they lit it and they just bounced these lights in these different places and like you really were, I think, a sponge. And then also it was exciting because we're at this point getting into the ability to kind of like rent some gear and to bring some of that knowledge and actually like apply it, which is, as a creative or as a filmmaker, when you can get to a point where the you're able to bring the tools to bear that are necessary to make the vision that you have in your head a reality. When you get to that point as a filmmaker, that's when it gets really, really exciting. And it takes understanding a lot of different skills to get there, because just having the knowledge about being a cinematographer is not enough. You're probably going to have to understand the business a little bit in order to get some money so you can rent the gear so that you can put the gear up. So it's bringing all those things together. But I think that point in time when you were gathering all this knowledge and then we were in a position to actually see it come to fruition as creatives, it was incredible. It was incredible. It was a lot of fun.
So tying that back to my previous statement, I think the working on House of Cards and for I guess to back up how that all happened, I was really into obviously I was really into a lot of stuff Netflix was making at the time. I was really into House of Cards as a show. I really enjoyed season one, and they filmed it in Baltimore. And some friends had sent me a casting call that they had posted on Facebook for Secret Service guys because
Mm-hmm.
they had a one day where they needed a lot of extra people. So I thought, this would be interesting. I enjoy the show. I've never been on a set that big. I'd be really curious to see what that's like. So I decided to go, and they called me shortly after and I was like, hey, how would you like to be like a core Secret Service person that appears throughout the season? We'll just call you and you could be part of Frank Underwood's Secret Service detail or whatever, just an extra. And I was like, sure, why not? I was didn't like my 9 to 5 job. I had just turned down film school, which was like really, devastating for me, I think, because I had kind of had this goal that I was working towards and then decided at the last second, no, I'm not going to do it. And I think that really threw me off. And it was a period where I was like, well, now I need to make a plan. So I was, going out and working on as many things as I could. And I was like, this is just another opportunity. So yeah, so then I started from going from being an extra as a Secret Service guy, ended up being one of the like staff core stand-ins, and that's where I started to learn a lot of the lighting stuff, and I got to hear the DPs and the gaffers work and see how they lit everything, and that's where I
Mm-hmm.
was really kind of eavesdropping on everything. And yeah,
Mm.
so that's sort of the kind of non-traditional, more unique part that I referenced as like my story. I don't know that it is, it's funny, everyone has a different path to where they are. And I don't know that I would ever advise anybody who, hey, you want to be a DP, go apply to be an extra on a show and maybe it'll work out and they'll bring you back and you'll end up working on the show like 5 years and you'll get to be a stand-in and shoot the rap films with the crew and
Hmm.
maybe even shoot a pilot episode on the stage itself. Like, I would never advise that, but that's just how it worked out for me, which I
Which all
thought was
things
kind
that
of
you
strange.
actually got to
Yeah,
do.
exactly. Yeah, which is kind of strange, and I never
Yeah.
foresaw any of that, but I just kept going, okay, I'm just gonna keep saying yes to things and be a good, reliable person. And when they call me, I'll show up. And the more I got to know people,
Yeah.
and then I could show them the work we were doing. And once you kind of established yourself, and I think that's a big part of people who want to make it in this industry. I think there's a lot of different things that go into it. There's a lot of different paths you can take, but I think it comes down to a little bit of luck, persistence, and then doing the work, and then putting yourself in situations where you're rubbing shoulders with the right people, and then you have the work to show that what you can do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have it and you meet somebody who is really talented, really incredible, you're walking down the street, you bump into Martin Scorsese someday, and he's like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" You're like, "I want to be a filmmaker." And he's like, "Oh, what have you done?" And you're like, "Well, nothing, but I want to be a filmmaker." I mean, it's back to square one, right? So
Yep.
you gotta
Yep.
take advantage. You got to do the work to take advantage of the opportunities and make those opportunities happen when a
Sure.
moment of luck strikes or something unexpected happens.
So through all of this for you, is there ever a particular point in the in your story where you kind of felt like, okay, I feel like I finally kind of made it as a filmmaker? I feel like, I mean, we never quite feel like we've made it, right? Which is what always keeps us driving forward, trying to do new things. But yeah, were there ever big milestones for you along the way, all along the way, and what did those look
I mean,
like?
I think I mentioned, for some weird reason, I did have a goal. Is like, I would like to, back when Netflix came out, they were putting out really good original content. One of my big goals was like, hey, I would love to work on a Netflix show. I had really no real plan for how to actually make that happen. So I felt like that was a huge goal, to actually be able to work on something like that for a number of years and to get to know those people and
Hmm.
still be able to talk to them to this day. That's a huge thing. And then I think just you and I having a business and working together and making a living actually doing this full time, I think is a huge thing. And I think I think you and I talked about this when we were
Yeah.
debating even doing this. And it's like, you almost have a little bit of like imposter syndrome. Like, why should we even be doing this? It's not like we're famous filmmakers, but I don't think you have to be a famous filmmaker. And if anything, I think there's probably more value to people hearing from regular, everyday filmmaker types than the crazy, rich, famous filmmaker whose story is probably not going to necessarily resonate with you or maybe even reflect your life situation. We live in small towns. And it's not like we live in LA or New York, and we're still able to make a living as filmmakers. So I think that's a huge accomplishment, and I think we've been doing it for this long, and it's our full time gig. We've worked with some big brands. We've gotten to travel around the world. I think those are all really great things that we've been able to accomplish. But what about you? Anything in particular where you were like, "Hey, this is actually working. We're actually
Yeah,
making it."
I know earlier you mentioned the 3 for 300 short film that you and I produced. It was one of our first kind of short films that we did together. And I think that for me was a pretty pivotal moment for the career because it was one of the first times, I'd done short films prior to that. It was a lot more like I did some stuff in Africa where we were rolling through some places in Sierra Leone or Rwanda and gathering really quick interviews with people, and we just didn't have a lot of time and we're always like rushing like crazy. We didn't necessarily have pre-production plans or like a really fleshed out vision for what the final project was going to look like. It was like going to these towns, interviewing people in Swahili and translating it to English, and then just kind of putting together what little stories they had. But 3 for 300 was a fully fleshed out, thought out short film that was based in reality. I would call it a documentary of sorts, but we had a game plan going into it, and we had an end vision that we were aiming for, and we also had the tools, I think, to bring it to life in a pretty good way. Looking back on it, when I look at it from where I'm at now, I'm like, okay, a lot of these scenes were really clunky. A lot of the ways that we edited were maybe a little bit like, yeah, self-indulgent in some things, but I think there are still a huge portions of it that stand up for me, and still, make me really proud that we had done it. But that short film, I think, brought a lot of the pieces to the puzzle together for us in the first time. And then you also mentioned the aspect of being able to fund it, which we were able to we were able to rally $20,000 in budget to do that. And some people are going to hear that number and think that it's pretty big. A lot of people are going to hear that number and think that it's extremely small. But for us at that time, it was big. It was a big amount of money that we could rent some gear, we could go out and work on it. And for me, the I think the real feather in my cap for that project was that we had creative control for the most part. There was not any one single entity or organization that was telling us this is how it needs to be done. We came with a vision put together pretty much already and sold that vision and got it funded. And yeah, doing that was, I think, for me, the first time that I was like, okay, I think we can do this. I think we can make this work. Yeah. And then from there have been a lot of other, I think, pivotal moments along the way. But that for me was the standout one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're always kind of, moving everything forward a little bit when it comes to goals, whether it's budget levels or the type of brands we want to work for. But yeah, those early goals when you really start realizing like, hey, this is coming together, and I guess I'm a filmmaker now, and I can actually say that I'm a filmmaker and that's my profession because I get paid to do it, and that's what makes me
Mm-hmm.
my money throughout the year. Is we're not doing other things, and I think that's huge. I think for me another big one was Kenya too. When we traveled to Kenya to shoot the documentary, going all the way back to
Yeah.
us talking
Yeah.
about our origins, and I was really into the planet Earth stuff and all that nature kind of documentary. I really wanted to. I think when I thought about my life as a DP in the future, I thought about myself as like being able to travel around the world and go to exotic places that, the everyday person doesn't get to see, and having really unique
Mm-hmm.
experiences. And so I think Kenya really started to, or Kenya really kind of checked that box and made me think like I'm glad this happened. I would love to see more of it. And that's like a huge thing to have accomplished, to be able to travel to another country, get paid to do it, and just have such unique experiences that even if I traveled to Kenya on my own, we wouldn't have had the same
No,
experiences,
no, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about the travel aspect of this work that I think drew you and I together and has been a real like fuel for us. So, we work on a lot of commercial projects and studio environments, and that's one category that we really excel at and we do a really great job at. And then, funnily enough, the other category that we really, really like and really excel at is like going out in totally uncontrolled environments where you have very little, you have your tools that you bring along to try and control things as much as possible. But, these two crazy different worlds, and they're sort of the two categories that we feel the most comfortable in and that we tend to get the most work in and enjoy the most. So it is an interesting juxtaposition, I think, there. We might have to think a little bit about why we like those two completely opposite things so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we like a challenge. I mean, I think
Yeah.
also, I don't know, like we had talked about, you kind of just end up taking the projects that come to you, and I think those are kind of different things that ended up coming to us, and we ended
Mm-hmm.
up doing
Mm-hmm.
enough of, because once you get one, then you have proof to get another, and proof to get another, and then you start to build out a portfolio and also develop your processes and just get better at it. And I think one of the things that we're really good at is planning. And I think we enjoy challenging ourselves. We always like to try new things, and we're always trying to refine our processes and take a process for that worked with one project and apply it to another project and see how it fits and tweak the model. And
Hmm.
I think we just like we love challenges, and it's really at the end of the day, all filmmaking is problem solving. And I
Yeah.
think it's if you enjoy problem solving and efficiency, I love efficiency.
Gosh, you
I
love
think you'll love
efficiency.
filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, for the listener, Brian is he's a
I definitely
real.
geek out over efficiency. So on the topic of goals, I mean, I would say it would probably be pretty apparent that one of your goals was to own a business and to be in business for yourself. So
Mhm.
when you started the company, you came here from DC, you bootstrapped, you cobbled up every dollar that you had, sleeping on the floor. What was your vision for Big River when you started? How did you have a big vision for what you wanted to be in like 5 and 10 years, or was it what was that vision?
Yeah. The vision for the company when I first started it was just to be something that I could make a living at and make videos, and that was kind of the I think one of the only criteria that I had at that point in time when I left DC. I knew that I wanted to continue making videos and kind of do it on my own terms and do it in a more, I would say, kind of creative, artistic way. And I just had a sense that given the experience that I had leading up to that point, it was going to be really challenging for me to get a job at a company that was going to pay me to make videos in the way that I wanted to and to be a filmmaker in the way that I wanted to. And so I think I just came to a realization that if I want to do this, I'm gonna have to strike out and do it on my own. And so for me, the first and foremost goal was to just try and establish a business model that was going to make enough money to stay open. And so for the first several years, that was basically the main goal. Now, when you and I met and started working together, I remember we kind of sat down and put together a mission statement and a vision and some really solid goals for what we wanted to do with the company and where we wanted to go. And that was kind of maybe I'd call that Big River 2.0 at that point in time. It was just a couple years in, but that was where we started saying like, look, we want to we want to grow. We want to always be growing in our abilities and um in our craft. We want to be a part of this community. That's what drew us to make this 3 for 300 short film. It was very community based. So the goal was never necessarily to work with Bacardi or to work with Jose Cuervo. The goal really for us was to constantly grow, to constantly get better, and to just slowly up our game over time. And we did that. We've accomplished that. And I think a lot of people struggle with comparing themselves to everybody else who's out there nowadays. And I'm certainly not the first person to say this, but comparing yourself to yourself is really the best thing that you can do as a creative, as a filmmaker, as a business person. Are you doing better than you did yesterday? And having that be your level of comparison that you do. So,
It's always important, definitely, to be objective about, especially in a creative career field, to kind of look at your work and be like, where can I improve? Where am I getting better? And to continue to find ways to grow. I mean, it's pretty easy if you really wanted to just kind of plateau and keep doing the same kind of work over and over and over again. And I guess if you're really your end goal is just to make a living doing filmmaking, maybe that's okay for someone. I don't think for us that's ever been kind of what we want. We always want to be, yeah, refining and getting better and working on bigger projects. And um, I don't know. What do you think Big River 3.0 looks like?
that's a good question. I know you and I have been kind of talking about that a lot recently. I think there's definitely a shift in this industry that we're feeling. A lot of people are feeling it, and a lot of people are trying to navigate it, and we're trying to navigate it ourselves. Um, I think looking ahead to the future that there's gonna be a lot of competition in a totally different way than what we've experienced in the past in this field. I know that, for instance, when we're pitching projects, we previously might have been pitching against 10 or 12 companies if we're pitching a project for an agency. And now that number is 30 or 40 other companies that we're up against. So it's becoming very saturated. So I mean, I think for us, the ability to kinda do what we're doing right here on this podcast, to be, um, selling the personality that we have, the work ethic that we have, the ability to troubleshoot, projects, the ability to give our clients a really great experience throughout the process is, I think, what's gonna set production companies apart moving forward because the access to good gear, good lighting, and the knowledge on how to do a lot of that stuff is pretty easily accessible now for everybody. What is a little bit more difficult is all of the personal aspects of production and of putting on a good production. And so I think for us moving forward, being more, um, intentional about all of those things is gonna play a huge part.
I think the industry is gonna be tough, and I think one of the things that, everything is so accessible now. I think camera gear even before it was cameras are easy to get, and now it's becoming even lighting is becoming even cheaper and cheaper, big, powerful lights by
Mhm.
Aperture that are becoming far more affordable, whereas before you would have to have a big M18 HMI, and you would have to have a generator to have a similar, or you plug it into a wall, but you probably don't feel that safe plugging it into a wall kind of thing. But it's stuff that's big lights are accessible to small crews and small budgets now. So um, I think the service that you provide as a company, I think the professionalism and the experience that you bring to the table is going to be a big deal. And then I also think your ability for storytelling and just your overall ability to craft a good
Yeah.
narrative is going to be huge. So I think for us to continue to build on those skills and to bring them to the table,
Mhm.
I think is definitely going to be a huge part of Big River 3.0.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I like working with you so much is that I think both of us, but I could tell very early on in our working together that if I bring Brian onto a project, if I work with Brian on a project, the damn thing's gonna get done, and, like, we're gonna go into the trenches together, we're gonna figure out how to make it happen, and along our career, we've made some pretty lofty promises to ad agencies, to companies, on the front end, and we just there's a confidence that we have, having worked together for so long, that even though this is maybe totally uncharted territory for us, we're gonna figure it out and we're gonna make it happen and we're gonna stay up late at night and we're gonna troubleshoot it and we're gonna, sometimes feel like we need to pull our hair out in order to deliver on this. And nothing was more, this was never more apparent to me than when we got a project with a brand whose name I will not mention, but this was a project that we really, we just didn't jive with it very much, and there was this particular set deck element that you were trying to make, and you really, really wanted to make it well, and I remember pulling up to your house, it was a day before we were gonna film, and you're in the driveway, and there's wood everywhere, and you're trying to build this thing, and you have a vision in your mind of exactly what it's gonna look like, and there was literally sweat dripping off of your face, you probably hadn't slept in, like, 3 days because 'cause you've been working on building this thing, and come hell or high water, you were gonna build it and you got the thing built and we were able to use it on the shoot and it worked, like, it worked, and just that level of
It
commitment
worked,
to
and
making
it's
stuff, I think is really it's really important,
yeah,
and it's also what makes it fun because you get to look back at that project and say, like, "Holy shit, I did not think when I promised this, I knew I could make it happen, but I didn't know how I was gonna make it happen," and we did, and
yeah.
that's always
It's part
maybe
of the fun.
maybe the most fun. Yeah.
One of the things that I think I'm really proud of in a lot of the work that we've done in the last, when we've been working together, I don't know that there's pretty sure that there's not been a project where we've made a promise that we haven't kept. We're always good at, and I don't necessarily just mean
Mhm.
deadlines and
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. I mean, I think we're really good at sticking to deadlines and always delivering. But I think we're always creatively trying to come up with different ideas and how to do something. And sometimes we've pitched some ideas where I'm kind of like, I think we can make this work. I think we can do this wacky thing and pull it off. But we're going to pitch this idea and we're going to buckle down and figure out how the hell to do it. I don't know. For me, I'm kind of the type of person, and I find this even when I'm doing, what might be creative work behind a computer. I feel like I don't really perform unless there's some degree of pressure.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of
Yeah.
times when we have these lofty ideas, I think it also oftentimes brings out kind of the best in us, I think, and also having you as part of the team, I think makes having each other as part of the team makes us feel a little bit more comfortable knowing we're not going into it completely alone, and we can always lean on each other to troubleshoot, try to think of other ways to accomplish something if our initial idea is not working.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's another big benefit to us having worked together for so long.
Yeah. All right, ready to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, so I had an idea, um, and we can keep it or we cannot. But so I had an idea. I thought we could wrap out the show. Like to try something. We'll call it. We'll end the show on a hot take.
Okay, I like it.
So I'll give you an option, and you just got to pick one.
Okay.
All right. So we'll start off with an easy one. What I think is an obvious answer, but we'll see. Favorite crafty cookie, chocolate chip or Oreo?
Chocolate chip cookie, the soft kind. Yeah,
Unbelievable.
definitely,
Come on.
definitely.
Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's your hot take. I disagree, but that's it.
Yeah, you love those Oreos, man. You're always going for them. We gotta
Well,
have them.
viewers can let us know in the comments which they think is the true winner.
Yeah, yeah. I
I say
think
Oreo.
one final thought is, for anybody who's still listening to this now, however long we are into it, um, finding and I think the point of this whole episode and you and I talking about working together and being in the trenches of this company together and finding success together. So for anybody who's still here, a huge key is finding those people that you can really connect with and really work well with and sticking with them and figuring out how to continue to create projects with those people because the longer you do it, the more you're gonna be able to benefit from each other.
That's a great way to wrap it up.
Sweet. All
All
right.
right, everybody, if
Until
you're
next
still there,
time.
thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Hey,
Cool.
we did it. My cameras, we did it.